the dark side. At that point in time, my whole identity was my business. The success of that business was whether I woke up in a good mood or a bad mood.
Welcome to the Matthews Mentality Podcast. In this episode, we have the privilege of sitting down with Chris Powers, a serial entrepreneur and the founder of Fort Capital. With nearly 2 decades of experience in real estate development and investment, Chris has established Fort Capital as a leading player in the industry with over $2.1 billion invested in various projects across Texas and the Sun Belt region. Today, we're going to dive into Chris's entrepreneurial journey, leadership principles, and insights into the real estate industry, as well as some podcast talk. Chris, welcome to the show.
Good to be here, my man.
Yeah.
Great to be in Nashville.
That was awesome. I did that. That was a one-time through.
Yeah, perfect.
How much, sometimes this will happen in the bio. Talk to me about, and we're not going to spend too much time on Fort Capital, the company, though it's a big part of the story, but talk to me about Fort Capital. What does that look like today? Number of assets, GLA, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, today we have an incredible team of 55 people domestically and 7 folks overseas in India. We have offices in Fort Worth, where I'm from, Dallas, Houston, and a small office in San Antonio. We currently manage we manage a portfolio of about 7.5 million square feet that we own. I mean, I don't know where the market's at right now. It's early 2024. We're all figuring it out, but you could call it $1 billion to $1.1 billion of assets.
Let's use 2021 values. How about that?
Oh my gosh,
10 billion.
10 billion. And then we third party manage about 3 million feet, mostly to folks that we've sold property to.
Has anyone ever said they love you as their property manager?
I think so. I mean, I don't know. Managing industrial is pretty good. You
That's
don't really
true.
have. It's not as emotional
Rents
as like
go up, vacancies go down, and there's not a lot of day-to-day. The reason I bring this up to the audience is we were actually just talking offline about property management is a tough business, and it's one of those businesses where, like, does anyone really love their property manager? You know, it's like, yeah, they're okay. So
we've taken a different approach to it. We have an incredible team. We've had a ton of third-party managers, and so we kind of built our practice on what did we love about them and what did we not like about them. You know, I'll probably, talk in my own book, but I think people really enjoy us. We've never had a client fire us. We've built great relationships with them. And again, industrial is maybe a little easier than multifamily or retail or office. Multifamily is brutal.
that's God's work.
My mentor was like, when you manage places where people live and, shit at midnight, and their toilet breaks, like that's a war that you're about to fight. That's not like a rational decision. That's an emotional one. And so anyway,
Tenants, termites, and toilets, the 3 T's of multifamily property management.
Right. And industrial tenants are pretty humble. It's kind of more blue collar-ish.
Good point.
It doesn't have to be sexy. They're not. I joke, like, you manage office, your tenant is a Class A office. Your tenant's mad that the Monet in the lobby is like crooked.
Yeah.
Our tenants are mad if like there's a leak in the roof or the foundation's cracked. And other than that, it's not hard to
Are
really.
you saying, was our Monet crooked when you walked in?
I did
'Cause
notice
if so,
it.
Zach, we got to talk to someone about this. It really bothers me. No, we don't have a Monet. I don't know who Monet is.
This is a great office building, though.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. We love being here.
Because it's great, there's high expectations.
This is right. Day to day, what are you doing? What does a day in the life of Chris Powers look like?
That's a great question. I probably spend, right now we're in the middle of a big capital raise, and we have been for the last year. And so I'd say probably a quarter of my time to a third of my time is there, and it ebbs and flows. Spend time on my podcast. And then I spend a lot of time kind of forward facing for Fort Capital, just trying to be a great ambassador for the business, keep critical relationships intact, build new ones, really like long-term. I don't think anything I do at Fort is for a result today. It's for a result like 4 or 5 years from now.
Why are you doing a capital raise? Why would you do that?
Great question. I think I know the answer.
That's why I get paid the big bucks.
Yeah. So who is Fort Capital? part of what I left out was we have syndicated every deal we've ever done. And that wasn't some decision. That was just what we did. We started passing the hat around in college.
So let's not assume the audience knows what syndication means. I do, you do. But when you say syndicated deal, like just in 30 seconds or less, what does that mean?
Syndicated deal means you have a deal. I'm going to buy it. I put it under contract. And then I go to a group of individuals, raise that capital check by check, pool it all together or syndicate it all together, call their equity, and that's what I use to buy the deal.
As opposed to, this is where you're probably going, the convenience of one chunky investor who does the whole thing.
Yeah, or even just pre-committed capital. Yeah. So rather than have a deal that I'm live with, I go to an audience and say, look, I want to raise $400 million. I want your commitments, and then I'm going to take that and I'm going to go start looking for deals.
As long as the deal falls within this kind of not loosely defined, but generally defined bucket.
Fairway.
It's industrial. It's 10 to 30 million. Here are the markets. Here's the class B, and if it falls within that, you've basically committed.
Correct, and that's a closed-in committed view. There's multiple ways to do it, but for the simplicity, it's more like if you, the seller, were like, "Hey, where's your money coming from?" My current model, I would tell you, I'm going to go raise it all as soon as you put this under contract, as opposed to, oh, I have a $400 million fund. There's no...
Yeah, you not performing on the deal will simply be a function of the actual offering in the deal, not like, oh, no, I couldn't raise the capital. Not to say that's ever been an issue. And so I'll ask probably more probing questions when we cover this part of your life of starting forward and how do you raise money for your first deal, right? But is it mostly friends and family?
Yeah. Yeah. I went to TCU. And
some oil money.
Yeah, there's a lot of wealth in Texas. And I don't know how else to say it. I had wealthy friends and family, maybe more friends. And they put money in deals.
That's good. What was the size of your first deal?
First deal I ever raised on was I raised $300,000.
Ballin'.
Three $100,000 checks called AMP Real Estate, which stood for Ayub Marcus Powers. And at the time, this was like end of 08, early 09. We were using that money in conjunction with the line of credit I had to buy foreclosed houses and flip them.
Let's go.
The first bigger raise I did was $1.2 million, and we developed 12 townhomes around TCU. And I raised that one from probably like 12 or 13 investors.
You said you went to TCU, but let's go back in time. Where were you born? Where'd you grow up?
El Paso, Texas is where I was born.
You got it. I mean, that's the Troy Marcus territory.
I know, dude. Troy and I, fun fact, Troy and I grew up in diapers together. Our grandparents were friends. Troy, if you're listening to this, I think there was a story somewhere. Either I bit him or he bit me at a birthday party when we were like 1 or 2. And that was like a big deal.
He told me you bit him.
Okay, fair enough.
He said you were a pretty bad kid and he seemed to have a lot of lingering resentment, but that's a different conversation.
I'm having dinner with him next week in Austin, so we'll bring it up. So grew up in El Paso, had 2 amazing parents. I have 1 sister. My dad was a lawyer. I think this is a funny part of my story, or at least interesting part. When my dad was 37, I'm 37 now, so this really hits home. He came home as a partner at a law firm and basically told my family, I'm going to become a doctor. Quit becoming a lawyer, went back to UTEP to do his pre-med undergrad. Then we spent 8 years going from medical school in Lubbock for 4 years, and then we did 4 years of residency. So it was this weird career path where you're basically like, we're going to go back to making $0 for the next 8 years.
Did you ever spend time talking to him, asking him, like, why did you do that?
You know, not to bring up a sad thing, he passed away 11 years ago when I was 25. I would imagine we would have had that conversation more and more over the last 10 years.
Oh, yeah, over the last 5 as you've had an evolution in your own career.
For sure, and a lot of who I am and I'm sure we'll talk, and my mentality comes from those formative years and kind of watching my dad and how that impacted our family and what having money kind of early in my first few years of life and then literally not having it by choice, which is kind of weird.
It is.
But I will tell you this, the thing he did tell me, which I think is important, he looked at life as I have one I do not have multiple lives. I think there's so many people on this planet, not even about money, because it wasn't about money for him, that are living a life they don't want because they feel like they're trapped in it. It's too.
And they forget that this isn't a video game. They don't just get to like, well, I'll get another shot at this.
Right.
Yeah.
There is no second chance. There is absolutely.
That's a great point.
And so
that's why you should move to Nashville.
It's people making money that are trapped in their life. It's people not making. It has nothing to actually do with money. Now, to some degree, obviously circumstances are circumstances, but in some way, shape, or form, most people will default to it's just comfortable to stay where I'm at. Mm-hmm. And what you see with a lot of people is, and I think Jeff Bezos said this, and I think about this all the time. He makes decisions on when I'm 80, will I regret, did I not do this or not? And I don't know if my dad thought about it that way, but his actions would say he did, was he would have lived a life of regret if he didn't try and become a doctor. 37, 2 kids, already a partner at a law firm, houses, got a nice house, the typical thing. And to literally go, we're going to go from whatever he was making at the time to $0 as a med student. And then I think he made $32,000 his first year of residency and $42,000 by his fourth. So over 8 years, he brought in like $150,000 total.
It was leaner times, outside of biting people. But what were you like as a kid, if you had to describe yourself?
From what my mom and teachers would say. So since I was a young child, every teacher would say respectful, but not didn't like authority, didn't like being told what to do from a very early age. I can remember being told that. I was very entrepreneurial early on. And I don't, I'll just kind of say it how, I probably was a little bit selfish. I just kind of liked things my way. But I was also willing to put in the work to have it my way. And I think going back to that story, when I wanted, this started when I was 7, my dad's pivot. Like if I wanted something, I had to earn it. Mm-hmm. I had to go wash a car. I had to mow a lawn. So from like a really early age, it just was ingrained in me. If I want something, I have to do this.
Do you do that with your kids?
Well, my oldest is 7, and we have a chore chart. And it's funny, my Palmer will say, "Daddy, we're so lucky." And I'll say, "Why?" And she goes, "Because Target is right around the corner from our house." So we have a chore chart, and every time she finishes, it's 25 boxes. It probably takes her a couple months to finish it out. We go to Target, and she gets a budget, $10 to $20. And if it's $21, we don't get it. We got to trade it back in and figure out a way to stay under. So I'm in the early stages of teaching them.
It's hard.
But the truth is, I'll tell you this. I think about this all the time. They don't have the situation I had. And this has evolved over time. If you met the younger Chris, it was like, I'm making work for everything and blah, 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 blah. It's like, that's actually trying to create a false reality for them. I don't think is the right way to live life. So I'm trying to instill in them values while also teaching them this is the hand you've been dealt. And you got to live within it, not try and create this fake reality. But I do think I teach them the value of things, what hard work looks like, why working hard matters. But we'll see. I think Moses Kagan tweeted this the other day, and it resonated. He had asked a friend who had 7th generation business, what's the trick to making sure you have a kid that is going to take over the business? And he said, what we've learned after 7 generations is it's random chance. So just keep having lots of kids. Like you don't really know who's going to know. Correct. Yeah. And I don't want them to live a life. I want to teach them, but I don't want to control them. I don't want them to perform for me. I want them to be their own people.
Yeah. I got 4 kids, and my wife and I always say, and this is not our line, we had heard it, but we use it all the time, is you never give birth to the same kid twice.
Yep. My kids are all different.
All so different. And you sit there, you're like, well, it's the same 2 parents, like same gene pool. And even then, that's not true, because your kids literally, at least mine, come out. Some have blonde hair, green eyes. Some have blonde hair, brown eyes. Some have brown hair, blue eyes. Some have brown hair, brown eyes. And that's just the physical component. So you can only imagine their mental wiring.
Yep.
And so, that's a great point. It's I ask you, we're on the podcast, but I ask you just because as a parent, I'm like, oh, well, they're going to earn this. And then I'm like, okay, yeah, you can have that. That's fine. And it's like, damn it, I did it. I did exactly. I'm the guy I swore I'd never be,
Look, this has evolved, and if I came on 5 years from now, I'd probably say it differently again. I don't know, but I think where I'm at right now is if I went tomorrow and you just said, well, what was your dad great at? If they just answered he loved me a ton, let's just start there. If I can get that one right, because what you find is parents that are spending so much time trying to make their kids great at sports, take over their business, basically force an agenda on them that they forget to love them.
No, don't even get me started on the sports parents. It's insane. And I actually think I'm pretty qualified to speak on sports and sports parents.
I think you are.
My dad obviously had a lot of success, and I don't think he ever even had a conversation with me about sports. The only rule was you have to play something and you have to go real hard. You have to. The only thing he'd ever be mad at was effort. If the effort wasn't there, and luckily it was always there, but I've never had a private coach in my life, ever. Yep. And now you see the culture of private coaching and like, oh, my kid's got a pitching coach and a hitting coach and a fielding coach. I was like, yeah. Does he have a dad? Right? Like, I don't know.
Yep. And you know this. It's like they're just kind of you can say everything you want, but they're just really going to watch what you do. A lot of it's caught, not taught.
They model behavior. Yeah, well, that's a good one. Caught, not taught.
Caught, not taught. Your kids are just going to catch more of what you're doing than what you're teaching them.
I like that. I'm going to use that.
And I think to your point, I tell my kids every day on the way to school, maybe not every day, but a few days a week, what are some things you can control? And they know they control attitude and effort. Those are two things that you can always control. And we talk about that on the way to school.
What was your attitude and effort like as a kid?
I loved everything, man. I wanted to be in it all. And I was really good at sports as a kid.
What was your go-to sport?
I started in football and baseball. So when I lived in Lubbock from 7, I mean, that's like baseball, football country. Yeah. I played select. I just played year-round. I think the only time I was actually depressed as a kid, so I skipped a part. So when we were done with Lubbock, my dad was from the Northeast. We moved to Connecticut for a year for the first year of residency. He thought it'd be a good idea to go do something new and move. It tore me apart.
Was it the winter or just?
It was everything. It was nobody treats football and baseball seriously up Northeast. That was my life at the time. So you go from playing these like all-star select leagues, and I've made some great friends, but then it's like taking 10 steps back, and you're playing with this baseball and football teams where you're so clearly and above beyond, and it depressed the hell out of me. And so I actually got into golf. I was like, well, I'm not going to play team sport. I'll just play something I can get good at. And I dropped it at 11. If I'd stayed in Lubbock, I probably would have played all the way through high school. Dropped it at 11, took up golf, and played golf middle school and high school.
I didn't know you were a golfer.
Yeah.
You still golf a lot?
Not as much right now with 3 kids, but yeah, I mean, I would say probably more than most.
What was your or what was the best you got your handicap?
Probably a +3, +2 in high school. Now, I mean, right now I'm probably a 4 or 5.
So pretty good.
If I played for 2 or 3 months straight for like every week, I could probably get back to a 1 or 0 pretty quickly.
Wow.
Like, it's always right there. You just kind of got to get it back.
Well, that's pretty good.
It's not bad.
Did you play in college?
What sucks about golf is once you've been really good at it, it's not fun to play bad golf. And that's probably me. That's more an issue in my own self.
And you don't have the excuse of football player or a basketball. Yeah. It was like, hey, it's my body, man.
Right.
I'm getting old. Like, you could be better at golf at 45 than at 25 because it really is an input sport. Speaking of effort and energy, is like, it's just what you give to it.
I probably need to treat it like, and I do sometimes, like, hey, it's better to just go have fun with friends and like play good golf.
Was there not speaking specifically golf related, and you touched on your father's career change and some of the challenges and maybe adversity it created going from, having a really stable, lucrative career as a partner at a law firm to basically going back to the beginning, in addition to the move to Connecticut. But was there a moment in your childhood where, kind of a seminal moment where something happened that you think maybe had a major influence on you?
I think just that in general, I think as I look back, I think the moments of weakness, my parents loved each other. They were each other's best fans. And so, but at the moments of weakness, I think was, again, you got to follow that career pattern where just these moments where it was like, we don't have money to go do this, but we could we hadn't decided to become a doctor.
And did you find yourself at any point developing resentment towards you? Like, why'd you do this to me?
I didn't resent him, but the formative moments were me and okay, so think about this though. You're making no money. They treat med school students like shit.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
They work all the time. They're on call. So you're not making money. You're never home to see your family, and you're treated like garbage for 8 years at a time when you got to imagine your peers were all state and law. This was the mid 90s. The stock market started. Their lives are, they're getting a vacation home. They have more time off. And we're back to like, it's one thing to not make money. It's another to not make money and never see your dad. I didn't resent him for that. What I took from that was, this isn't going to be my life. I do not want people to control me. I do not want to be, I remember he'd be on call. He'd be so tired, and then he'd have another night of being on call. And again, like you could say, yeah, these are first world problems. Like, whatever, they were our issues. But I saw my dad always tired, always grinding. And I just said, I'm not going to be controlled by anybody.
Yeah. And that actually, and yes, law profession financially would be better, but a lot of lawyers, they're effectively on call by being on hour.
For sure.
A doctor, literal definition of on call. And you said, I'm going to get into real estate.
I just said, I'm going to get into business, and I'm not going to be, so I've never really had a job. And look, for the sake of the podcast, there was a lot of years where I was like, I'm unemployable. I'm badass. I'm an entrepreneur. There's also dangers to not being willing to submit to authority. And I've learned those in life, and we can probably talk about some of those experiences. But the truth was, from an early age, I was very determined. I was going to work for myself. Nobody was going to control me. I was going to have financial freedom. And look, it's just, again, caught, not taught. I just kind of witnessed it. It wasn't because, I was mad at my dad. I just kind of watched his life, and that's what it was.
You never wanted that life. You were adverse to authority. You didn't want to be an employee or on the clock. What major do you choose at TCU that satisfies those desires?
It's funny. I got into, so I always saw it, ironically, like
I think they call that an entrepreneur, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think like people that have to major in entrepreneur management actually aren't entrepreneurs. It's like they asked, what's the quote? This guy wanted to start a symphony and at 25, and everybody told him he couldn't do it. So he went to Mozart and said, well, you're telling me I can't do it. You did it when you were 10. And Mozart looks at him and goes, yeah, but I also wasn't going around asking people how to start a symphony.
There you go. Yeah.
It's kind of entrepreneur management. So I got into finance. So I say I wasn't going to work for anybody. Again, I'm like, now it's just kind of my mind, but I was going to be financially free. So I got into finance thinking I'll get into like investment banking, do that for a couple of years, and I'll take over the world. But then I picked up marketing as a major. And so I did finance and marketing, and I would tell you, I learned very little in finance and marketing. To this day, there were things I learned that I'll never forget. It changed my
it's more of a high-level version of this, but it's sales. And I'm biased, but I think everybody's in sales, whether they know it or not.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the, outside of just your effort and execution, probably the biggest determinant of your professional success and very much even your personal success.
For sure. I mean,
I got to sell my wife every day on staying married to me, and I do that by being loving and kind.
That's it. That's the two ingredients. No, but he would always, my marketing teacher, Bob Aiken, would say, if you can't sell anything, you don't need finance and accounting. Doesn't matter. Sales comes first.
Yeah. So you're finance and marketing at TCU. Were you a good student?
Yeah, actually was.
Like a 4.0?
3.9.
Why not a 4.0? What happened?
Because I didn't try, because some laziness my freshman year, I could never like get it back. Yeah.
How does that make you feel?
I could care less at this point. And I honestly regret even getting it.
I don't know. It sounds like you got some repressed anger there, buddy.
I've never had anybody ask what my GPA is once I got out of college. Maybe I'm different because I actually never was employed.
If I meet someone and they say they have a 4.0, I swear to God,
I
literally go like, what's wrong with this person?
Look, college is great. I don't think I've ever looked at somebody's GPA or where they went to school. But I'm in the real estate business. Like going to Harvard or Yale has
It's a negative connotation in real estate.
almost. And
Hey,
I think it's,
You were a double major?
yeah.
You know, we have a thing at Matthews against double majors.
Oh, is there a list out there that I would be on?
Yeah, it's called "Don't hire this." We have an unspoken, like, generally speaking, we don't hire double majors because they're too much of a box checking mentality. Like, I'm going to double major and I'm going to have all these things because that's what you need. And so they tend not to have ingenuity. Tend not to. I'm not saying you don't, but they tend to be like I do double majors and I do everything right and I get the job that my parents told me to get. So
To be fair, I graduated high school in 3 years, not because I was smart, but because I was rebellious, and I got in a lot of trouble after my sophomore year. I was supposed to go
high school?
Yes, I was supposed to go on this huge trip to Europe that in El Paso, like you kind of start hearing about it in 6th grade. It's just like the trip. It's 3 weeks, guys and girls, all over Europe, and I got in a lot of trouble. And my dad, he had told me like I was consistently getting in some trouble. And he was just
what does
like,
trouble mean? Like you're stealing cigarettes from a 7-Eleven?
no. So when you grow up on the border, Mexico's 15 minutes away. I can leave my parents' house. And so I was sneaking out of the house on weeknights. I'd be in Mexico.
Different Mexico back then.
Totally
too,
different.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to Mexico the first time when I was 13 years old.
Would you do that if you were in El Paso? Would you let your kids at 16 do that? Is it really different? I don't know.
Here's the thing. Look, well, I went all the time until 07. Then the war started. I've never been back. But like before then, I would tell you it was safe. I mean, I was probably naive and stupid. So
Yeah.
maybe it wasn't as safe as I thought, but probably went over there 250 times as a kid. And I mean, that's what you do in El Paso.
Yeah, I guess so.
You go to the desert or you go to Mexico or you have a house party. El Paso doesn't have sports teams and all this crazy shit to do on the weekends.
no,
You
that's
just
a good
kind of do it.
point.
Which was actually good for me because by the time I got to college, you meet the people that have like never had a beer before and they get to college and they wreck it. I got to college and I was like, I felt like I was like slowing down
Kind of had grown out of it already.
a little bit.
Was that so? Again, part of this is I assume there's someone listening who, in their head, they want to, or maybe haven't started, but they plan on starting to do something great, right? And they're like, but man, like, am I that person? I've always gotten in trouble. Like, I've never been able. And what I've tried to tell anyone that I've had the ability to influence, so to speak, is like none of that really matters. In fact, being in a little bit of trouble as a kid is probably a good thing because it says you're willing to push the boundaries, and sometimes those need to happen. Like, trouble for you is going to Mexico, but like breaking curfew.
Yeah, or just lying to my parents, sneaking out, telling them I wasn't going to be there, or saying I'm going to spend the night at because my dad would be like, dude, quit going over there. And I'd be like, cool, we're just going to spend the night at John's house. We're just going to a movie tonight. And then he'd get a call that I was in Mexico.
Nowadays, they'd put tracking on your phone.
Correct. It's a totally different world. But anyway, he was like, you can't go. So I said, well, if I'm not going, I'm spending all summer. There was something called C School. I'm going to take classes and I'm going to skip junior year, go straight to being a senior. And I'm out of here.
So I can go to Mexico.
Correct. I'm out of here. And so I graduated in 3 years. So why I told that story, I double majored because basically it was I wanted to stay in college 4.5 years. I loved being there. And my dad was basically like, if you're going to stay an extra semester, because I missed a year of, I was still like graduating early on my timeline.
Yeah.
He's like, you got to major in something else. And I was like, cool, I'll just pick up marketing. And I loved it. I'm glad I did.
So you're TCU, you're graduating. Did you go straight into real estate?
I started buying houses my freshman year of college.
Why? I mean, I don't mean like to make money. I mean, like, why houses? Was it just that? Was it that 2004-05 period of time? I'm trying to time this right now, but
I have zero great answer for you. So the answer is money. So I got to TCU.
What year was this?
This was 04.
Okay.
I arrived May of 04. Didn't come from a lot. I mean, at that point, I remember arriving to TCU where it's like in El Paso, it's just different, dude. It's very low key, and I'm not saying East Texas isn't humble, but compared to El Paso, so you show up on campus, you have kids driving Mercedes and Range Rovers, and I just like, not even parents in El Paso didn't even drive Mercedes. I was just like blown away. So anyway, I was like, I got to make money to like hang out with these, to go on spring break.
Like insecurity,
for sure.
jealousy.
I wouldn't say jealousy, more just like I got to keep up. And like getting a $10 an hour job as a bar back or like that ain't going to cut it.
Mm-hmm.
Met a guy named Adam Blake, who's still an amazing friend of mine today. Great friend. He had won Entrepreneur of the Year.
He said there's a company called Countrywide that will give you 103% LTV.
Boom, you've read this. Yeah.
No, I haven't. I'm guessing this.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
No, this is true.
Yeah. So he had just won Entrepreneur of the Year as a freshman. He was a scholarship athlete, had lost his football scholarship, and was either going to have to leave TCU or make money. So this is 2004. So you're right. Housing market's going crazy.
It makes sense.
He basically taught me how to buy homes with no money down through Countrywide. 3% down, 6% cash back at closing.
Zach, I guessed that. It wasn't in the notes.
Okay, well,
I have not read this.
So there you go. So started buying houses.
No income, no job.
No income, no job. They're called liar loans. But at 18,
it was like, Chris, how much do you make? And you're like, well, I don't really make anything. Well, to get this loan, you need to make $105,000. It's like, but I don't make it. It's like, but if you put it here, we'll give you the loan. It's like, but I don't. It's like, no, you should right here.
Well, what you would tell them, actually, there's a little more to that story. What you would actually say was, I'm going to make 105 because you're going to give me this loan and I'm going to flip this house. So
Countrywide's going to make the loan. They're going to get the fees and then they're going to package it together and sell it.
Correct. So I can't make the $100,000 I'm telling you I'm going to make unless you give me the loan. And they're like, oh shit, okay, we're going to give that loan.
Hey, listen, I don't know about you guys, man. What could go wrong?
Yeah.
Right? Sounds pretty decent.
And as an 18-year-old, again, I think a superpower is being naive.
Yeah.
I mean,
ignorance is bliss.
It is. I mean, I think a lot of the days there's days I really miss being young and stupid, because one, I didn't think I was stupid.
You're way less cynical.
For sure.
Yeah.
Like everything's a possibility. You don't know what risk is because you really haven't had your hand slapped yet. And anyway, so then I started buying houses. Okay.
What are you really risking in the sense, like if you, what are you going to lose? Like you're not going home to your wife and 3 kids saying, hey, we have to sell the house and we got to move because I've risked it all and lost it all. Right. Like when you're 18, like what are you risking your credit score?
Correct.
You know?
And you don't even know you're risking that.
You don't even know.
You don't even know.
That's why you sign up for all those credit cards. I think they outlawed this, but you remember when we were in college, they were like credit card, like there'd be these credit card booths set up, and you're like, hey, you want a credit card? Like, hey, wait, I just swipe this? Like, yeah.
The best hack back then, I don't know if you can still do it, was your parents could put you on their credit card as a co-guarantor. So every time they paid their credit card bill, you got credit. So I actually had credit really early on in my life because my dad had always paid his credit card. And so I don't know if that still exists. But long story short, bought houses, started refining them, and look, I was in a great market around Texas University. We bought quite a bit of them, started a property management company, started a leasing business, leasing homes around TCU, and really built a nice business out of it. Always kind of still thought, though, I'm going to go to Wall Street, and I really had no foresight. I didn't really realize. So one, I graduated at the bottom of the market, December 2008. So
well, I was going to ask because my notes do say you founded Fort in 2005, right?
So what I would just tell you is it was called something different. To me, it's been one continuous stream of work. It's been the same company with a couple different names along the way. Correct.
I was going to say, let me get back to Fort, but it sounds like it was all the same. How did you know? Talk about timing the market. It's really difficult, but how did you know, or did you not? Did you get hurt at the end of 2007, 2008 when the market crashed and you're flipping homes? And there's been a million movies made about it. People who were flipping homes who had no business relative to the income they were making or their experience. Like what happened to you during that time?
Zero. So I was very fortunate. So one, in Texas, TCU at the time, think about TCU. We weren't in the Big 12 yet, but we were on our way up. Yeah. So really growing school, leases signed guaranteed by parents. And to be honest with you, I never lost a tenant or anything. And we hadn't started flipping homes yet. I owned 12 rental properties by my senior year.
Were your rates fixed?
Yeah.
Oh, you did. So you didn't do the teaser adjustable one,
or whatever they call them.
Yeah.
No.
Well, that's what hurt a lot of people.
Yeah, we didn't.
Because they would get in at a rate at like you get in at 2% and it's, it's 18 months, it's going to switch to 7, but you're going to have sold the house by then.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. I would.
That's what I said is because you weren't flipping them, you were thinking more long term.
Well, and I won't even give it that. I wasn't smart enough to know one way or the other. All I was smart enough to go is my house can afford this payment. I don't care if it goes lower or higher. I just want to know, can I make this payment?
That's good.
There wasn't much thought to it. It would always sound smarter in hindsight.
Broken clock is right twice a day.
So got a line of credit. The lucky thing, I think careers have luck. I was going to start flipping homes. So at the end of 2007, I got a line of credit from Wells Fargo for about $250,000. It was for $250,000. And right as I got it, the market started getting kind of weird, and then it crashed. So I had bought and sold some rentals, but I wasn't really like fixing them up and flipping them. I was like buying them, renting them for a couple of years, and selling them. But it was perfect timing because I had that line of credit, which was a revolver. And when the market dipped or crashed, I was going down south into Fort Worth and buying homes that had sold for $130,000, $140,000, and I was picking them up for $40,000 or $50,000 a year and a half later. We were truly worth flipping them, repainting them, recarpeting them, getting them all ready, and then listing them for like $99,900. And my pitch was like, it's still a 40% discount to what it sold for 2 years ago, and it's refreshed. Terrible business. I could talk about what would have made it a good business, but I learned a lot. Met a builder through that phase, and quickly got into development.
Okay. How many students, plus or minus, if you had to guess, went to TCU from 2004 to 2008? Like how many?
It's usually it's about 9,000 undergrad, 3,000 grad.
Okay, so 10, 12,000 total students. How many students, if you had to guess, said, I'm going to go get these loans and buy homes?
I know of about 7 because there was about 7 of us.
So why do you think of 10,000 people, you're one of, let's round up to 10, so what is that, 0.0001%?
I think it's a combination of DNA, just God's gifts, like how you're born. I had to do it. It wasn't like I had tons of money and I was like, I'm going to start. Like, it was kind of like, don't go on spring break or start buying houses and afford spring break. I was kind of making money for trivial reasons. I had a partial scholarship, but my school was paid for by my grandfather. So it wasn't for that reason. It was more just to have money to like do stuff.
You think some of it is this kind of Goldilocks zone in terms of lifestyle growing up, where if you grew up super wealthy, you wouldn't have the motivation to do it in the sense like you don't need the money, right?
Correct. I had a need.
It doesn't mean that rich kids don't do these things. A lot do, but like you didn't have the need. But if you grew up so poor, there would be so much anxiety and fear of that poorness that if you look at a lot of first generation college graduates, especially ones who they go to college first time, oftentimes they have to take on student debt. Even though they may want to do these more entrepreneurial, risky pursuits, they take the most safe, secure, government-based job possible because it's like, hey, I just have to make sure that I do better than the previous generation. You're kind of in this Goldilocks zone, which is you were wealthy enough to have a taste of it, and in many ways kind of have it taken away, but you knew what was nice about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't taken away so much that you're like, look, I just have to do the safest thing possible because I know how bad it can get.
Yeah, it's a very fair statement.
Yeah, just thinking of the psychology of why an 18-year-old of 10,000 students, there's a small group that say, oh, I'm going to go do this.
And look, I'll call it what it is because I think a lot of maybe we don't all come to the conclusion for the same reason. And I'm not saying it in a bad way, but I think I was so driven to not have to depend on somebody else for my future, which is, we'd call that an insecurity to some degree.
Yeah.
A chip on your, call it whatever you want. There was something deeply driving me to not want that. And again, at the time, if you had asked me when I was 18 or 19, like, is this what driving you? No, I wouldn't have thought that. But the truth is, and it's carried on into a lot of my life. I mean, it's led to some good things and it's not led to some good things. But there was a deep, I'll call it an insecurity, or some people would say you've been not abused, but you're kind of retaliating from some
compensating.
Yeah, some what's the word? trauma.
Well,
Self-inflicted trauma.
This is just my opinion. I think trauma is a very abused word. No pun intended. Like, I think people are like, oh, I have this trauma. And you're like, well, what is it? It's like, my teacher said this to me in 5th grade. I was like, all right, well, I mean, then I might not have felt good at the time, but trauma, like.
And I felt really insecure. I mean, maybe this is the first time I've said this part publicly, and this is an insecurity. I felt insecure that I didn't have the wealth that a lot of the folks that I went to college with had. When you're around a lot of that, I was an SAE. I love all my friends.
I don't know
They're
anything about
amazing.
fraternities, but I know SAE was the rich fraternity at USC.
Yeah, and look, I love all, but I was insecure about it, and I didn't want to.
Did you hide it from people?
No, I just probably overcompensated by being Mr. Entrepreneur in college. And the truth is, I was probably, by the time it was over, like not making more money, but
yeah, you probably were on the way.
Yeah. But I was driven by a lot. And that to me was, if they can do these things, I'm going to do these things. And since I'm only going to depend on myself, I got to get it done. And so you just kind of are always in this cycle of like, I got to get more done.
Not that you would ever change anything, but if you had to go back in time and talk to the 18 to 22-year-old version of yourself, what would you advise a younger Chris Powers?
One, okay, I'll answer your question, but I think another thing, it's funny. I'm 37 now. It's the first year in my life I've actually felt young and I have time. Every year of my life, I felt like I was falling further and further behind. And so one thing I would tell 18 to 22-year-olds, dude, you got a long way to go. I mean, God willing, you live in some. I remember there were days when I was 22 thinking I'm so far behind right now.
And was this behind other people or behind the vision you had for your life?
Just behind.
Yeah.
I'd tell you today, I mean, I think it's because 37, my dad did this at 37. I'm at a place in my life in a good spot in a lot of ways going, look, God willing, I got 50 more years. I mean, that's assuming I work till 85. Medicine will get good. I'm in pretty good shape. I'm going to keep focusing on my health. 50 years. I've only worked for 18, 19, 20. But I would tell you at 22, 23, 24, and I say that, and I could also have moments today where I'm like, shit, I got to get going, dude. I'm way behind.
You think that's wiring? Like you were just born that way?
Yeah.
Yeah. I
And
agree.
it's a superpower, and it's my Achilles heel. Because people that always feel like they're behind don't live in the moment very often. They're always thinking about tomorrow. And I've sacrificed a lot. It's not daisies and roses, and I don't know how far we'll get. But look, there's a dark side to it.
What is the dark side?
Not feeling good enough, never really being satisfied, always feeling like your identity and your self-worth is in something different than just you being you. Like God didn't create me to be some. My self-worth isn't my bank account, isn't how many properties I own. But for a long time, I believed that. My kids don't give two shits how much I own. They don't care about my size of my company. They care like, are you going to put me to bed? Do you love me?
Are you going to do the funny thing when you read this story? You know, every night my 2-year-old said, pick a book, and I read it. He always picks No More Monkeys Jumping on the Bed, which because I act like a monkey jumping on the bed, and so it starts with 5 little monkeys and goes down to 1. So I have to jump off the bed 5 times and like hurt myself. And like last night I was like, oh, I pick a book. He picked that one. I was like, is there any other book? Like, because I said, this one, I got to work real hard, man. But no, he doesn't, kids don't care.
So the dark side is, and look, when you're not present, you don't value family in the moment. You don't value friendships in the moment. Never with bad intentions. I love my friends. I love my family. I want the best for them. But when you're not present, it's not just hours or days can go by, years can go by. And you look up all of a sudden, you're like, oh my, you kind of snap out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, look, it's part of growing up. I mean, I think you have to get there. But when you don't have a wife or kids, you don't have to worry about it as much. But you start, if you want to have a good family, at some point, you got to start making some clearer choices.
Without a doubt, yeah.
And it's not always easy. It's easy to sit here and say, I take my kids to school, I put them to bed every night.
It's not always what you want to do.
Correct.
Yeah.
Or even is my mind there? when I'm reading that book in bed, am I actually engaged in
dude,
that book, or am I thinking about what happened at
I
work?
struggle with that. Like sometimes my wife will be like, "You're a million miles away right now."
For sure.
And I said, "I know."
So back to being a kid, this has been something that people will laugh that know me. I can be staring at you, looking you in the eyes, listening to you talk, and you think I'm listening. And then at the end of you say, repeat back to me what I said.
I have no
and
idea.
I have not heard one thing you've said.
Yeah, I always say, someone says something, I go, "I'm sorry, can you say that again?"
Yep.
Because the first time I wasn't listening. Not because to be disrespectful or anything. It's just because like somehow my brain started going in a different place.
I'd say the podcast has helped me out a bunch because you're listening a lot. You're engaged. You have to stay in it.
Half of the reason I wear these headphones is I listen better. Because like, if I didn't have the headphones, I'd be like, we were talking about the book, and then I was thinking about the book, The Monkeys in the Bed. I wonder if I hide the book, then maybe I won't have to. I'm sorry, what'd you say? Can you say that again?
That's a good idea.
All right, so thank you for sharing motivations, especially when from a society's judgment standards, like, oh, well, that's kind of dark. It's like, yeah, but it is what it is. It's not dark. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But let's talk about those motivations and how it led you to eventually Fort Capital. You're flipping homes. You met with a developer. What happens next?
Yeah, I met a great partner, Andrew Curtis, and we partnered for a few years together. And he really helped me learn to build and develop. And we went back to TCU and we started building student housing and we just started building big homes and we just started developing. And I became a deal junkie. I had land deals going on, townhomes, student housing, multifamily. I mean, I was kind of
anything where you underwrote to where you thought you could make money?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
We were Fort Worth experts, but we weren't asset experts. And really all we were, we got to a point where we were just like really, really busy. My dad died in a tragic bicycle accident when I was 25. So
what year is that? 2011?
That was 2012. He died in May of 2012. And at that point, Andrew was he was from the Panhandle. I didn't really know what was going to happen to my life at that point. It was terrible. My dad was in an accident. He was in the ICU for 40 days and passed away. And so it was a timing where he might go back to the family business. I was just kind of like in a funk. And so we decided to split. Still one of the best partnerships I've ever had. Just a great guy.
Andrew.
And now he's a phenomenal entrepreneur up in the Panhandle. So I kind of had not a restart.
You were a Fort Worth generalist doing a bunch of products.
Correct.
Your father passed at the same time Andrew was kind of in the crossroads, and so it was this moment to
we split.
Yeah.
And then at that point, I had just gotten some skins under my belt, made some money, some real money, and basically had gone from doing tons of deals to then kind of this land strategy. We were just buying infill land everywhere. I was flipping it to builders, assembling land, flipping it to Graystar, Toll Brothers, Alliance Residential.
Were you entitling it?
Entitled. So we were buying unentitled, entitling, and making like 4 or 5X on it. I mean, we were making big pops. And through that, I met my partner today, who's now the CEO of Fort Capital, Jason. He was working at David Weekley Homes, and I was selling him land. And we were just kind of on opposite sides of the table, but built a really nice friendship and done a lot of deals. He wanted to leave. I said, hey, come work in my office, because he was kind of going to start his own thing. I said, let's just office together. And we did. And we started doing deals, and the rest is history. We've now been together 11 years. Those first 3 or 4 years, we kind of kept doing land deals. We started doing ground up development again. And I was like, I hated development. It's hard. There's so much risk you can't control. I didn't think the juice was really worth the squeeze.
And Texas is probably better than California. But dealing with the cities and the neighborhoods. And
I don't have the temperament to develop in Texas. If you put me in California, you'd have to put me in an institution. I would never be able to deal with what they deal with out there. But we just said, look, we want to build a big business. We don't want to depend on these chunky development fees and hoping the city council is going to approve our permit. And so we looked at the world, and I can get further into it if it matters, but I don't know if it matters for this. We chose Class B industrial. There was a reason why and everything, but we wanted recurring revenue, something we could buy. And in 2015, we said, we'll never do another development again. We'll finish the legacy projects we have. Everything going forward is industrial. And since 2016, that's the company we've built. We've acquired over 12 million feet of it. We've sold off about 5 and currently own about 7.5 million feet.
Before we spend a little more time on that, your dad, so he was bicycling?
He was in Cloudcroft. So my dad loved to ride bikes, like
You mean like
Lance Armstrong.
Yeah, cycling.
Not motorcycles.
Okay.
A few years he'd go to the Tour de France and ride in the amateur lane on the side. He rode
he was
the Hotter
into it.
Than Hell 100 in Texas. I mean, he was a great amateur rider. That was his hobby. He ran marathons up until he was probably mid-30s.
What
I think
happens
he
when
ran.
just knees start hurting?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But he probably ran 30 marathons. I mean, I remember in his office, there were all these pictures of him coming across the finish line. And I've never run a marathon. I don't think I've ever run more than 5 miles, actually. We were talking about this the other day. I think it's the farthest I've ever run without stopping is about 5 miles.
Dude, listen to this. I had never run more than a mile in my, I think I ran a mile as part of like a fitness test. I'm a sprinter. And even then I wouldn't define myself as a sprinter. Let's just say I'm more of a twitchy guy than like a long distance guy. And I think it was Sober October, me and the guys were challenging each other. We had to work out every day. And there was like days where I was like, I don't want to go to the gym. And I was like, I'm just going to start running. I ran a mile, then 2, then 3. I got up to like 9.5 miles.
Really?
Yeah. Hated every second of it.
It's there's so many patterns in my life. It's kind of coming full circle. I'm kind of getting into running, not because of my dad, but anyway, I'm still at 5. I've still not made it past 5.
Not to get all deep on you, it's like a weird connection you could have. Like when you're running, you like talk to him. It's like, well, if he did it, if he could do it, I could do it, right? I mean, you are his son.
I don't know the exact quote, but the father is embedded in the son.
Yeah.
To some degree. Some part of your dad lives within you.
What I found when it came to running, and I'm a slow runner, I struggle, is it's just 1 foot in front of you. It's like, okay. I just I was like, okay, there's that tree ahead. I'm going to run to that. And then
the next tree.
Then that's it. And then all of a sudden you're like 4 miles in, you're like, and what happens is your heart rate stabilizes. The first mile, my heart rate would jump from, whatever resting is 60 to 180. And then it would float down and kind of settle at once. And you look at the heart rate, because I have a heart rate monitor, between miles 2.5 and 7, it wouldn't move.
Yeah, it just
so I was
sits
like,
at
all right.
160s.
Yeah. So that's my.
You got your whoop.
Yeah, I got the band. It was good. I actually enjoyed it, and it was super efficient. I would run out my door, and I live on an old country road where nobody's on, and I just run up and down the road and then back home.
I'm jealous.
Well, again, you could move out to Nashville. So your dad, he's cycling, and he gets hit?
No, we don't. Nobody really knows. So he was in Cloudcroft, New Mexico, riding with his 4 best friends, and my mom and all their wives were there, and they were going to meet him in town, and they dropped him off at the top of the mountain, and they were going to ride down and then meet him in town. And my dad just kind of took off from the pack. So you got to imagine you're kind of coming down winding roads. And nobody will ever truly know what happened. To this date, we don't. But he took off, and by the time the group turned the corner to see him, he was already laying in the side of the road. There was actually no evidence that a car had hit him. The bike didn't show any of that. What we think happened, it's a theory, is that a gust of wind kind of came off the mountain. Maybe he hit a little pothole and when you're strapped into the bike, it's like being in a snowboard.
Yeah.
You just kind of whiplash.
Because you have the feet click in,
your feet are clicked in. And so by the time they saw him, he hadn't passed away there. He went to the ICU, but he was pretty injured. They airlifted him out.
Was he wearing a helmet?
He was wearing a helmet. I think the life-threatening injuries started there, but I think in the helicopter ride back to El Paso, I think he lost oxygen. He stopped breathing for a couple minutes. And when you lose oxygen to your brain, it never comes back. Yeah. And so I remember like it was yesterday. It was Memorial Day weekend. I think that's the holiday in May. I was at my buddy's lake house and literally woke up that morning. Again, I don't think I've shared this. I woke up that morning. I was single. There's probably 20 of us down there. Woke up at 5:30 a.m. This was not the end of the weekend. We were in day 2 of a 3-day trip and had this weird feeling. Walked to my car at 6 a.m., drove back and forth. Never done it in my life. Have no idea why. Got home, went back to bed, and then woke up and the Colonial PGA golf tournament was going on. So I was like, well, I guess I'll just go do that today. On my way, get a call from my mom, and she's like, your dad's been in an accident. He had been in an accident a couple years before and broke his arm. And she was like, I don't think it's terribly serious. I'll call you once I really know. And I'm literally walking in, and I get another call, and she's like, you got to come home. And that sent a chill down my spine. And then
You just tell from like the tone.
the moment I'll never forget is landing in El Paso, seeing my dad's best friend standing at the escalator as I'm coming down. And I knew at that point. And he basically said, we need to get there as quickly as possible. I don't know if he'll be alive by the time we get there.
Oh, geez.
And he ended up living for 30 more days. But again, you don't know it in the moment. And I'm using this story, but I think it's a lot. You carry. So what did I do after this all went by? I didn't deal with it. I worked harder.
You just kind of
I took care of my mom and my sister. I had to take care of issues. I became the man of the house. And I buried a lot of trauma that I've dealt with more. I've cried more the last 2 years of my dad's passing than I did in the first 10. It's all, and probably that's getting older, having kids,
and getting closer to an age where you remember him, you know, or even just when he decided to do a career change, which sounds like it had a profound effect. Let me ask you about your dad. When he was younger, obviously it sounds like you looked up to him, you're close to him, but there were in high school discipline and authority, but throughout college and even the 3 or 4 years out of college when he was around, had you guys become closer, or was it still a very, you know, the traditional father-son relationship?
So my dad was such an amazing dad. He was not interested in being the cool dad. He was interested in doing the right thing. Long-term, doing things for the long term that as a young, stupid teenager, I might not like him for in the moment. And I think that's part of the reckoning. It's like there's these moments that I keep hitting in life where I'm like, I'm so glad he did this. I hated him in the moment.
Well, part of the reason I'm asking is because you posted a letter a month or two ago, and I read that letter, and I was like, damn.
That's my dad.
Yeah.
He didn't know anybody would ever read that.
It was a G.
And so what I would tell you is...
It was such a good letter. It was almost like it was fake. Like I know it wasn't. I was just like, it was like written perfectly in terms of like aspirational values.
Yeah.
Like
that was
no one may know this, but you know this and God knows this. And it's like, damn, it sounds like that's out of a book.
And I wish I could say the day I got it, it hit me like it did today.
You're like, you don't understand, Dad.
But my mom sent me that email a year ago and was like, hey, I don't know if you remember this, but this is the last email. Because at the time I had saved it, but this is the last email your dad ever sent you. That was 3 days before his accident.
Oh, wow. And what was it? It was something you were going to do what everyone did, which is like, you know, a bank was telling you like, hey, if you just check this box, we can do this for you.
So basically what had happened was, well, let me just finish that one thing. So my dad and I always got along, but there were years where we challenged because he was unwavering. He was like, I'm going to do the right thing. I don't really care if you hate me in the moment. Long term, you'll thank me. I think I hope the parent to be, because it's so easy to want to bend to your kids in the moment. And then those last 3, 4, 5 years, we became like best friends, and he believed in me more than anybody on the planet. That's critical. Okay, now back to what you were saying in the letter. Yeah, banker, I wanted to get a loan to develop some townhomes. I could get a better rate if I could show that I had more cash. Well, I didn't have the cash. And so basically, and I'm going to botch it a little bit. The banker was basically like, if your dad my dad didn't have the cash to give me. He had cash, but not to like give me.
If he moves it over for a couple days.
If he moves it over and I can show it on a bank statement, I could get a better rate. It was a gray area. Everybody does it. And as soon as my dad knew it was like the everybody does it bit, he was out.
Yeah.
And I was probably, I can't quite remember, but I was probably frustrated because it was like.
Because you're like, you're just costing me money at this point. You're going to have the cash back in a week.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you guys can go see my Twitter or whatever. If you come to my office, it's hanging up on my wall. But he basically sent me an email about how he would do anything for me, but he's not gonna basically break his values to do something. And the world needs more people like that. And I should be proud of myself for not doing that. And, that kind of thing.
So you lose your father, and I think a lot of people in the pursuit of excellence in whatever it is they want to do, many have terrible loss like this, and it is in its most basic form, true adversity. How did you, and you touched on it briefly, but how did you overcome the adversity of losing someone that was so close to you and just getting back on the horse and like moving forward in life?
Well, like I said, I don't think I dealt with it in hindsight how I should. I buried it. I didn't deal with it. My way of dealing with it, well, one, I had to take care of them. I have a mother and a sister. And when I say take care of them, I had to get our finances in order. My sister had just lost her father figure. So I was kind of like a father figure to my sister. And I was like kind of a husband to my mom at 25. But I met my wife. I actually met my wife a week before my dad's accident. And so she met my family at my dad's funeral. That's how that's how my wife met my family. Usually it's like, they're coming in town. We're all going to go to dinner. Nope. She met my family. And so we became super connected really quickly. So I had that going for me that year. It was an incredible woman that stuck by my side. And
you buried it.
I buried it, dude.
Yeah. And so if you weren't tending to your mom and your sister, in addition to the relationship, you just worked.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to some of the it was an easy to jump back into that chip on my shoulder and keep going. And I think a lot of that's also rooted in this idea that, especially I think males get, is like, you don't want to be seen as a softie or a pussy.
Yeah.
So crying and being emotional about it, that just wasn't in the deck of cards. I had to be strong for my mom, my sister, everybody around me. I put more on my back and more on my back and more on my back. And if I look back in hindsight, I think some of it, again, it wasn't a conscious decision. It was just like, I'm not going to let anybody see me vulnerable or weak or sad or anything. I'm going to be the guy. And all I can say is this, in my opinion, to some degree, I think every guy is going through that in some way, shape, or form. It's going to break at some point. You can't pile stuff on forever. And for me, I started to break a couple over the last 4 or 5 years in different ways, and be a little more vulnerable and let a lot of tears out. And
it's like a dam.
It's a dam. And some guys can hold it longer than others, but it's going to break.
Because life is just going to continue. Like, let's use the analogy of a dam, and water is the feelings. It's just going to keep filling up, and eventually it's going to spill over, the dam breaks or something. But at some point, you can't hold the water back forever.
Yeah, you probably know that feeling. Like, I've actually had this feeling while we've been sitting here on the podcast. Like, I could probably shed some tears right now, but that feeling of like, I'm not going to let it out.
Yeah. Kyle's going to call me a bitch.
Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking, you said, don't be a pussy. I was like, yeah, I always say, like, and quit being a bitch.
Yeah.
Like, but because that's
how we're raised.
That's how we're raised, if I may. That's how we're raised. That's what we were taught.
Yeah.
That's what society expects, especially of males. And I think there is validity. You do not, as you know, have to agree with me for the sake of it. But I do believe that most people need to stop being a bitch most of the time.
Yeah.
But I think there are people, often males, especially like kind of, I'm a male, like I'm gonna deal with this like a man. They swing way too far the other way.
For sure.
And I think that, and it's, I use this line a lot. I use it at work. I use it with my kids. And my wife is like, the truth is in the middle.
Yeah.
It's like, I think I do, in my humble opinion, think most people need to stop being so fucking sensitive and such a little bitch. Like, everybody it's like, I have this drama and my feelings. But there are people who actually need to express themselves. I being one, and my wife's helped me work on this,
For
where
sure.
it's like, well, no, I'm not going to make my problems your problem. I'm not going to dump on you. And it's like, well, but it's showing up in another way.
Correct.
Does that make sense?
100%. It's a lot of what you're talking about is accountability. Like, there's a lot of people who just don't want to take accountability for anything. And so that's a form of weakness, and it's always everybody else's fault. No, I hear what you're saying. We need more strong men in this world. Strong men,
Yes.
servant men that are there to serve others, but strong men.
Yeah. And they're not training that in school.
No, it might be swinging back, but
I think so.
we have a
I'm
ways
very
to
hopeful.
we have a ways to
That's
go.
a longer conversation.
Yeah, that's round 2.
All right, so you deal with it by burying yourself in work. Let's talk about work for a second. 2015, you really focus Class B industrial, and it just takes off? Fort Capital?
Yeah, I mean, by that point, like, had kind of established myself, had, like I said, made some money, was full of confidence. But I think why we took off is important. It's hard to be good at something when you're scattered. And at the time, like I said, we were doing so we were really busy, but we weren't really making a ton of progress. So
Is that because the inefficiency in doing something new every time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, this. I mean, you come from a family of athletes. Your dad didn't become great at football because he played basketball at night and soccer in the morning and football in between. He got good at football because he just played football every day.
Yeah.
Tiger Woods is Tiger Woods because he played golf every day. That carries through to business. I mean, and the problem in business, unlike necessarily athletics, is we tend to think because we're good at one thing, we can be good at everything.
Yeah, good point.
Because it's not physically taxing, all these things. Like, it's easy for Tiger Woods to say, I'm not going to play football, because it's like, if he gets one bad hit, he's done with golf.
It is clear that it is a different sport.
Correct.
But in the finance world, it's not clear.
But if you if you read Good to Great, you can read any of the books. But if you just look at the best companies of all time, one thing they all share in common is a deep, deep focus. For Amazon, it was on the customer. It was such a relentless focus on the customer that's probably the best. Anyway, we weren't focused. We were really busy. And as I was starting to raise money and try and do more deals and bigger deals, professional investors kind of kept saying, look, you're good. You have good energy. You'll probably make money. We want to give money to the guy that wakes up thinking about townhomes every day. At the time, I was trying to raise a townhome deal. I don't know if you're going to wake up tomorrow thinking about student housing or land or sorry. And then on the recruiting side, people want to know when they're going to work somewhere what they're doing every day. And my answer was, at the time, I thought was a great answer, was like, you'll get to do it all. You're going to get experience everywhere. Professionals don't want that answer. Okay, so we're like, all right, we got to focus. So I had to say that to say we focus. So then you said, why did we take off? One, in hindsight, like, picking industrial was a good move. And I think we put a lot of great thought into why we did it. Did I ever think it would be where it got to as quickly? No, but the tailwinds that played out, we were betting on. There was also, we didn't want to develop. So there was lots of reasons besides just the macro economy of why we got into it. It was kind of also like, what do you not want? Don't want to develop, don't want fancy buildings, want easy to manage tenants, all that stuff.
Yeah, fancy buildings, office. Again, the Monet, multifamily nightmare.
Class AA multifamily.
Retail sucks.
Highland Park. I mean, my buddy that owns Highland Park Village, unbelievable entrepreneur. That thing prints it, but it's a heavy lift. You got to be on your game, and that's a totally style of company. So anyway, we just focused and we picked the right thing, and you just cover a lot more ground and can grow a lot quicker. Without entropy, without leaking energy. You're actually gaining energy. Like, I can't imagine Tiger Woods becoming great at golf if he had to spend the first half of his day playing tennis every day.
No, he wouldn't. He wouldn't. He might be good, but he wouldn't be great.
Correct.
And even then, I could argue probably wouldn't even be good, especially golf is such a technical sport. So 2015, you just started accumulating. You're syndicating each deal. Just roughly speaking, did you go from effectively zero industrial assets to how much over the next, let's call it 3 or 4 years, until I want to touch on when you made the decision to go to chairman? So like in that period of acting CEO.
Yeah, we were probably at like, I honestly, I'd be lying if I'd say we were probably at 5 or 6 million feet.
Yeah, so I mean, you went from
years.
0, not to 1. You went from 0 to 10. I mean, that's a big growth.
But we started with a team. We started with a reputation. It's not like we were totally starting.
No, I get that. I just mean in like saying, hey, we're gonna like start this industrial platform. It wasn't. Wasn't like you took it over from someone else.
No. We had never bought it. The irony is the thing we picked to do was something we had never done.
That's funny.
And we had done almost everything. We owned office building at one point. We owned retail.
Ignorance is bliss. It was the one product you didn't do because you didn't do it, you didn't think it sucked. And it actually didn't. I mean, industrial, again, there's fundamentals that I'm sure you recognize that led you to the product, but then the markets cooperated. The markets you're buying in have done very well.
Yeah.
And I know there's thought behind that.
So the markets were easy. Everybody buys in the Sun Belt for the same reasons. We happen to be in Texas, which might be the greatest real estate market of the last 10 years. Yeah. I mean, it's been great. Sam Zell did a lot of reading on him. He was like, try and buy assets they're not making more of. He was actually talking about mobile home parks at the time, but Class B industrial actually fit that bill. Last mile was becoming a buzzword. Mm-hmm. There was just lots of like reasons from a macro perspective.
And so it grows. It's doing great. Most people don't choose to step out of that. Why? When was this, and what was the reasons for saying, hey, I'm every day, 8, 10, 12 hours a day. I'm active CEO now. I want to be a chairman, and in many ways from a day-to-day responsibility, have other pursuits.
Okay, so again, the dark side. At that point in time, my whole identity was my business. The success of that business was whether I woke up in a good mood or a bad mood. Somebody told me the other day, they said, if the outcome of the situation you're in is going to define who you in that moment, you've already lost the game. And that was 100% me. I rode this wave of emotions. When you're doing that, you tend to not make as great of decisions, or you think you're making rational decisions, but you're really making emotional decisions. And to be honest with you, I had an amazing team. I loved everybody. It's not that I didn't love Fort Capital. I didn't love my job at Fort Capital. Yeah. And at the time, I kind of was like, at the time I was probably thinking like, is it me? Is it the business? But this thing I had loved doing forever. And the team was now at 20 people, 30 people. Maybe 20, 25. So I was like, I'm going to hire an executive coach. I'm going to become the best CEO there ever was. It's clearly, I just haven't been trained. Again, never worked for anybody. So I didn't know what, I was in YPO, but I didn't have a model of this is what being the CEO looks like.
You didn't go to business school at Wharton where you're like, no, I already know what to do.
And my partner, Jason, is such a great CEO. He's 10 years older. He came from a big company. He knew about what I call the chicken of business: systems, processes, teams, culture, they're just the things that every business has. He was very good at all of that. I just kind of wanted to go get business and bring it in. That's what I love doing. So anyway, we hired the executive coach. I was unhappy at that point, didn't know why, but I really went into it going, I'm just going to level up. And for me, it became apparent. I didn't make the decision for probably 3 or 4 months into it, but in retrospect, it was probably the 3rd or 4th day of meeting with him that I was like, oh, I'm not the CEO. Now, I will give myself credit. One, I reached that conclusion quick, and I was at least humble enough to admit it. Most people, like my friend Brent Bashore says, most small businesses don't stay small on purpose. Most reason why a business doesn't grow a lot is because the leader stays the leader. And it became really apparent to me. At the same time, Jason, my partner, to be fair, he was already almost acting as the CEO of the company. But I can't remember what maybe COO was.
Certainly from maybe what I call an operational standpoint.
Somebody, if you hadn't told anybody what our titles were, but just said this is what each person's doing every day, most people probably would have been like, he's a CEO. And then they would have been like, well, what's he? Is like some crazy bastard.
Brand ambassador.
Yeah, Brandon, whatever you call him. Just a hustler, just a true 0 to 1 founder, like high energy.
Yeah, I mean that is the cliche, founder's dilemma.
Yeah, the founder early on sets the pace of the company, and I was definitely doing that.
Yeah,
but there's a point where setting the pace of the company doesn't have to be this push every single day.
Yeah,
the flywheel and the momentum of the company should be doing that on its own.
I agree. Another analogy I use is kind of like a space geek. It's gravity. It's planet formation. To get the first parts of a planet to stick together, the rocks, it's really tough. But once it gets to critical mass, the gravity increases to where it starts attracting everything, and it kind of grows on its own in a sense. And
For
so
sure.
to have an operational guy try and start a company from 0 to 1, that could be a challenge. But then to have that founder, that entrepreneur, that kind of just make it up, just go win it, figure it out later, that might not be the best personality or skill set for a large organization that you want to operate at a high degree of efficiency.
Yeah. Look, every company is a flywheel. It is. Now, some move faster than others. Most founders at the beginning, they're the one just pushing that flywheel to get it going. But once the thing's going, the founder doesn't need to be pushing it. If they do, the business is actually isn't working right. That's a bad sign if the founder's working as hard in year 10 as they were in year 1. But then we've kind of grown up idolizing these, like a Mark Zuckerberg that can go from college dropout to still being CEO of a $2 trillion, whatever they're at. That's such a rare, he's had to change his identity and job 150 times.
Yeah.
And Jeff Bezos. Now, again, Jeff started in his late 30s. He already had some wisdom, but the true people that can really do that, that's just unique. But I think we've grown up kind of seeing that. And so I think I've had this conversation with so many people that now that I've done it, that are the CEO of their company. And I think a few things. One, they look at it like I'm not, what makes them a founder is kind of competitive and all these things. They look at it as a failure if they're not the CEO anymore. Couldn't be further from the truth. If you really want to do what's best for your company, get out of CEO, put a good CEO, and that's the best thing for the business. It's not about you. It's about the company. Our company's 5 or 6x since I left 4 years ago. I would sit here very happily tell you, no way in hell the company would be where it is today if I'd stayed CEO. But you see it all the time. And there's other things that you become good at. And so anyway, I made a decision. Jason and I came to the conclusion that's what we were going to do. We spent 3-4 months kind of figuring out a plan and implemented it. And that was 4 years ago.
And this was 2020 or 2019?
I think coaching, no, it was, I think I left the transition happened summer of 2020. And so we probably started talking to Lex, who's our coach, in like pre-COVID. And then like as COVID was starting to happen, those first few months, we kind of were going through the motions of realizing.
So another topic to discuss, and maybe this is tied to it, is you've become very big in the podcast world. You started the Fort podcast in 2018. I'm going to ask the second part first is, did that have anything to do with this timing of?
No.
No? Okay. So then let me ask you, why'd you even start that? Like, what was the lightning bolt? Like, I'm going to do a podcast.
Again, I think most things like I think I've answered this several times already. I wish I had a great story. So I've always been super inquisitive. Love asking people tons of questions. Love being a student of business. Was always like, if we weren't on a podcast, I'd go back. I was with Kyle today. We talked about this. So I literally started, podcasts were becoming popular. And I just said, I'm going to record 10 conversations. They were mostly with my YPO buddies. And I'm going to publish them. And then I'm probably done. And it turned out I loved doing it. And so it was a hobby. I just kept doing it. And then my guests started seeing a lot of value because like early on they were just doing like it's not like anybody was listening
doing
to
you a favor.
And then like a few guests would be like, holy cow, I like raised some money because somebody heard our podcast, or like somebody brought me a deal because they knew I was doing this. And then we started seeing we were recruiting better because people were listening. People were bringing us deals. We were raising money from people. I called it building trust at scale. I was building warm relationships.
Yeah.
And so it became this kind of win-win-win. It was a win for me because I got to scratch an itch. It was a win for the guest because they were getting value from being on the show. And it was a win for the things I'm involved with because it brought attention to the business.
Which is I say funny. It's really more interesting because that none of those, it sounds like on the surface, were motivators. It was like, yeah,
zero.
you know, this, yeah.
I mean, if you go back to like when
happens.
If you go back to like the humble beginnings of the podcast, the first one I ever did was an iPhone just in the middle. We were just like kind of talking close to it, had no microphones or anything. I mean, it was literally an iPhone with an app called Anchor, I believe. And we just kind of set it in the middle, like on a small table to where you can just.
So how many episodes have you done now?
343 was this week.
343?
Yeah. That's probably like 500 hours.
What episode was I? What number was I? 290? Jeez. I heard it was the best one. That's what I heard.
I'll be honest with you. It was until Barry Sternlicht came on. You're number 2 now.
Am I?
Barry got you.
The CEO of Starwood?
Yeah.
Yeah, well.
It was a great episode. We didn't really know each other then.
No.
You came in like a freaking, I remember leaving that day.
Just how I am.
And they're like, how was it? I was like, that dude is the real deal.
Intense.
Yeah.
I'm intense about things that I believe strongly in, and I believe strongly in what I do for a living and the people I do it with.
You can tell. I mean,
and things I don't, I'm actually pretty low energy. And like my wife would tell you, Kyle is probably the most chill, relaxed guy. But when he starts talking about something that he's passionate, I don't like the word, I have great enthusiasm.
One weakness I have that I'm working on, especially I think because you have kids, I'm not good at having energy on things I don't want to do. When I'm in it, nobody's got more energy. As soon as I'm not interested, it's hard for me to fake being interested.
I understand that.
And that's a weakness of mine.
I think I was like that, and the blessing, didn't feel like that when I started, but the blessing of cold calling and sales, like legit sales, but cold calling, which is just one step short of door knocking and the most hardcore sales. Like, I mean, imagine going door to door selling religion, right? Yeah. Just below that is calling strangers to talk to them, to get them to talk to you about real estate. But there were a lot of days that I didn't have it. I was tired. Half the time I ate like Chinese food for lunch, and I was just low energy. But what you do is you see direct correlation in success and failure relative to there is a direct correlation between energy or enthusiasm and outcomes.
For sure.
And so I've just developed the ability to, hey, no matter what I feel like, hey, how you doing? Yeah, all right, like da da da. And so with my kids, like there are days where you're like, oh, I got to have this conversation, and I think that's just is it a skill? Like a characteristic, an attribute that you have to develop. Ripping coldies, baby.
Ripping coldies, baby.
I remember that was what you liked about it. Ripping coldies. You know, it's funny. We say that all the time at Matthews. I thought, but everyone's like, man, I've heard this podcast. You ripping coldies. I use it all the time. I was like, well, I'm glad that's what you took away from it.
That and you talking about watching Troy Polamalu just smoke people and having that feeling inside of, okay,
I gotta find something else.
My career is done here.
Yeah, you realize God makes everyone different, and with sports, there is kind of a Machiavellian aspect of sports that there really isn't anything you can do.
Yeah,
like I hate to be so victim mentality, which I don't like, but there is a reality. We talk about Troy Polamalu. Let me use an even easier one. Like there's no amount of effort I could put into basketball to be as good as a Kobe, a Michael, a LeBron, or someone, and so.
Michael Phelps will always beat you in swimming.
Yes.
His body type.
He's
like a damn seal.
He's 6'6". His back is like wider, is like wider than than my entire body sideways. His legs are like, his hips are, I've seen the guy, and it's like, he literally looks like an avatar from that movie.
Yeah. He was built to swim.
Yeah. He was built to swim. But there's also a peace of mind that comes with like, well, it just wasn't a possibility. I think that's the problem with business and why there is a lot of real regret that exists in business, because you never see it. Like you never look at another business. Well, I could never do that because it's not really a physical thing.
Look, again, I'm only 37. I've done it for 20 years. I can tell you what we've been successful for, and I've studied a lot of businesses. I would say this: most people's problem in business is from a lack of focus. You show me problems you're having in your business, and I can show you where you're not focusing on the most important thing. Because guess what? I don't know why we are this as humans. We get really good at something, and then it becomes kind of boring. So it's more just fun to kind of start something new. Or something's almost about to start working. That flywheel's almost about to start spinning without you pushing it, and you quit right before and go start. And so you see some of these entrepreneurs, they're always kind of moving on to the next thing.
We see that in brokerage. That's probably the biggest.
I guarantee you most of the brokers that quit your company
would have been successful.
Are 1 year or 1 month or one call or 1 year away from doing it.
Oh, don't even get me started. Like that I tell people all the time, the worst part of my job is the quitting, not from a business plan, because we know what the quit rates are. We kind of factor it into our growth models. It's just modeling. Like it's not that. It's not like, oh, we had X number of people quit this year and that threw us for, no, it's like we kind of know what those percentages are. In a really bad market, they go up a little, great market, they go down, but they're pretty consistent. The worst part of my job is the person who quits, especially when I know the person, because there's almost no one, how would I say this, not double negative. Everyone can be successful at this business. Now, if you're incredibly intelligent, that's an accelerator, but it's not a determinant. If you have that great sales personality and you can turn it on, accelerator, like without a doubt. If you have a background in real estate, accelerator. But the only determinant is really just like an indomitable will to just keep going forward and never give up. So what I tell people is like, I don't know, how do you want to define success? And I say, I want to make $500,000 a year. Okay, great. Whatever your definition is, fine. $500,000. I don't know if you're going to get there in 3 years or 5 or 7, probably not 10. That's a little further out, but you'll get the beauty of real estate brokerage. And I'd argue real estate in general, because like nothing we do is that complicated. It's simple, but hard is what I say. And people conflate simple with easy and complicated with hard, but it's simple and hard. And if you just keep doing those simple things over a long period of time, that is the hard thing to keep doing, but you will make it. And when they quit, there's this parallel life they live where they didn't quit and they're successful. And respectfully, they've probably alleviated financial anxiety, and it opens a lot of doors in their personal and professional life that, you know, what you want evolves over time. And when you're 22, it's like, I want a house and a car, and, you know, but it evolves over time. But inevitably, almost everything you want probably takes capital. And when they quit, it's like, how are you going to go find that capital? And the answer is there isn't another path like this.
Yeah. And you're starting over.
Yeah.
And look, like, I've never actually met anybody that like the money actually became the thing they really were. Like they'll say that's what they were on, but I've never met any.
A ticket.
But you watch the greats, and it's easier to point to. We could talk to the greats in business, but like Michael Jordan, Kobe, Tiger, they just wanted to be the best. And they knew money wasn't like most of the greats and everything have never once in their life said I did it for money.
Money is just a outcome.
Correct. Yeah. And
what was your biggest driver motivator? And I'm going to kind of lead you here. Let me just say, in your late teens and 20s, what was your biggest driver motivator early on? And perhaps how has that evolved today? And just if I may, what do you think it may be in the future?
I think early on it was money.
Yeah. Was it alleviating financial anxiety? Like just like, oh, I don't want to worry? Or was it the keeping up with the Joneses, like they have it and I want it too? Or maybe a combination of both? Yeah. Okay.
It's something I will fight and at least recognize. To me, it's been a security blanket, having the freedom to do things I want to do. Again, we've talked about the dark side, but that was probably early on. And then again, once you kind of get it, it kind of morphed into, I want to be the best. So our mission at Ford is to be the best real estate operator in the world. And
how do you define the best?
Better than we were yesterday.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think I think that's why I think best is a good, because I don't think Kobe or Jordan would say they got, like, there was probably always one more day left in the tank. I'd say Amazon sits here today and still thinks they can get better. They still haven't mastered serving the customer yet.
The reason I ask is like when I sit and meet with people, it's often goal setting. And even then I change the word goals to commitments, because like to say I have a goal, it's like, well, yeah, I'd like to hit it, but if I don't, but a commitment is different.
I think when you want to be the best at something, what you're saying, and I've studied this, we have a culture of constantly analyzing every part of our business and trying to get better at any one thing. And so that is the DNA of the company, because you can always improve. It's just like why, again, I keep going back to Kobe and Jordan. I just listened to the Founders podcast where he kept talking about it, but every single day those dudes showed up to practice and tried to get better at footwork. Even after winning 4 or 5 championships, they just wanted to get like an inch better. So I think becoming the best is more of a mentality of getting better at the little things. It's not like some huge leapfrog, like you're going to get some huge trophy at the end. It's really just saying, I'm always going to leave the opportunity open to get better at something. I think where I'm at now is a little bit of that. And I think I'm moving more into like, I want to be of service to people.
How do you define service? There's a lot of ways to look at that.
I feel an obligation to kind of pass it along. I think
It's like a mentorship.
yeah, but maybe not necessarily I think service means kind of building a life where
There's a foundation.
yeah, you genuinely care about other people, and people are better off because they were around you or because they associate or you're leaving more on the table than you're taking.
The world is better for having had you.
Yes. And that's, again, a good buddy of mine said this the other day, and I'm stealing it from him, but he framed it really well. And he just said, my goal in life is for somebody to say, that guy left more on the table than he ever took. Mm-hmm. Like he could have taken so much more. And what the record he set was he left more on the table. And I think that's a good way to kind of look at it.
How would people who've worked with you over the last 15, 20 years, how would they describe you if I was sitting in a room with them and they had a couple cocktails?
Intense. I think it's evolved over time.
Intense, like are you like a yeller or
no? Intense of
like
high expectations.
Yeah, okay.
I mean,
extremely.
I think I exhausted people for a long time. But again, I've never asked somebody to do something I wasn't willing to do. That's 100% a fact.
That's my line here.
So if I'm setting high expectations, you can guarantee the ones I've placed on myself are 10 times harder.
I tell someone I'm never going to ask you to do something I haven't done.
Correct. You can't really, it's almost impossible to set expectations on someone that you haven't already set on yourself. And expectations are weird. You wake up every morning, you don't realize that you have an expectation that hot water is going to come out of your sink. But when it doesn't, you trip a breaker. Mm-hmm. You don't realize when you walk into your closet that tie better be ready. When it's not there, an expectation. You don't really know what expectations are. Entrepreneur types, there's times in my life, even today, I can't actually tell you what my expectations of certain things are. I just know it has to be better. That's not always a good thing either. So I would tell you, but I do think they would tell you that he was kind. He cared about us. He wanted the best for us. Was I always easy to deal with and work with? No. But I also don't think business is just about just like kind of like my father was. Like I knew he loved me. I knew he wanted what was best for me. But there were times I couldn't stand being around him because he wasn't willing to do the soft, cool, nice thing.
Because that isn't what was in your best interest.
Correct. So I do think people would say he's always done what's in our best interest. And I don't know. Like I hope they would say that I hope that story is getting better and better. But I know they would say, especially early on, I was super intense.
That's good. I just remember I'm about halfway through the Walter Isaacson book on Elon Musk.
Oh, yeah. I just
however intense you or I might be, I read that book, I was like, man, this motherfucker is intense.
But man, I can relate to so many of his, like even the dark side when he talks about going into those dark moments.
Yeah.
The intensity. I will say, I think empathy is something a muscle that I've built over time. I think it's come with wisdom. I think some people
it wasn't like a natural empath.
I'll say this: I am unbelievably empathetic to someone in need that's hurting, that needs a lot of help. I'm not as empathetic to people that already have it all, or you know.
That's a kind way to put it. I always say I'm very empathetic to people who didn't choose their difficult circumstances, but people who, through their own poor choices or lack of, I mean, it's a choice not to go get, but like I hate to say it, it's like I feel like I have no empathy. It's like, well, yeah, that you chose that. Like I don't know what to tell you.
And that's not necessarily the right way to be. So I think the muscle I'm building is being more empathetic towards people that don't have like immediate outwardly reasons to be empathetic for them. Like,
that's a good way to put it. It's a muscle,
I can't believe you're making me stay here till 7. I'm like, I don't give 2 Fs. But somebody that's homeless on the street that's got a sign, my heart like dies for them. I just don't have. So I think that's just wisdom. Like I used to say, like I'm never, even when I have kids, I'm I'm always going to be the last one to leave. I'm always going to.
Listen, when man, the amount of judgment I had pre-kids was incredible. Like these guys raising their kids. When I have kids, I'm just like, oh, okay, I get it. It's not that easy.
There's just some things you can't experience until you experience them.
As it relates to, say, hey, how would someone describe you or your mentality and tense, and what, if any, resources or what advice would you have for the audience? The things that have helped you. You mentioned a professional coach. What else?
Like people in my situation, or
no, just in general who might be listening, who they could be in college, they could be early in their profession, they could be thinking about starting a development company. It could be anybody. Just what are some things that you would advise people to help them develop personally and professionally that have helped you? I always lead people say, oh, it could be a book, it could be a series, it could be a documentary. I don't know.
Again, I can say these things because I've lived through them, so it's not what I was necessarily. But I think goes back to, like, especially if you're the young person listening to it, is like you have more time than you think. The quicker you can find something to focus on and get passionate about, the quicker your career will take off. Switching jobs every 2 years might feel like you're busy and gaining ground, but you're not. And at the end of the day, the only thing I could sit here right now and tell you that I really care about are our relationships. Like, that's really all that matters.
Last question. You've been 37, 15. No, I mean, you started working in college, but let me just start you at 22. You've been 15 years. We've looked backwards and kind of covered today in the conversation what you've done, and it's a lot. What are you going to be doing 15 years from now?
That's a great question. I asked myself that. I think I hope to still be doing the podcast.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to lead to kind of maybe some interesting things.
When you're running for president? We need you.
I'll be your VP.
No, I am running for president.
I'm not running for president.
I like my life too much.
I know. That's the sad thing about the state of politics.
Yeah. Honestly, when's Troy running for president?
He would be good at it. That dude's got the energy.
I think he's going to do it.
In 15 years, I think I'll, let's see, my oldest will have just graduated college.
That's what I'm saying. You're an empty nester. You got to find something to do.
I think here's one thing I know. I will always be in the game. Now, I can't always define what that game might look like, but I don't ever I'll never retire. 15 years is a long time. I'll probably still have some type of real estate business. I like investing, but I think my role, even I've learned this as chairman, I'm going to be good at backing people, shining the light on them and being part of their ecosystem. I don't really want to be the guy anymore. I don't ever want to go back to being CEO. I want to work with CEOs. I want to work with leaders, even maybe not in business. I think with the podcast and maybe skills I'm developing and maybe financial resources that we'll have is like, I'll be great at just backing people. That doesn't mean like venture capital backing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
It's just probably owning some pieces of businesses and giving my energy to a few things. And again, hopefully leaving a lot on the table and being of service to people. I think, I don't know, my world's, I couldn't have told you I'd be here 15 years ago.
I mean, I think this is true for everybody. It's fluid. It's fluid. It evolves.
And I'm open to that.
Yeah. I think Bruce Lee said, be like water.
Be like water.
Yeah.
I might, I'll say this, like, again, we could be here a year from now and something happens over the next year where I really have a mission to go do this thing. I don't have that right now in my life. My mission right now is more focus on what I have. My kids are young. I don't want to miss those years.
What's the age of your oldest kid?
7.
Dude, got coached some youth sports, man.
I know.
It's so much fun.
I do.
That's my jam.
I haven't yet.
Yeah, I'm like a professional. Dude, my 6-year-old girls basketball team smashed people this year. Yeah.
That's probably the fear I have. Is like I don't want to coach and like not have a great team.
It's intense. I know you. You can't have and like your competitive streak. Like it's. Hey man, if you don't like it, I blame God made me this way. My 6-year-old, if they lose, like if I may, I'm a great coach. Like I'm always positive. Like I'm not the crazy yelling dad. If they lose, like I'm not. You did it, but dude, I wear that loss for days. Like a wet shirt just soaking on me. I hate it. I hate losing. I fucking hate it. I hate it so much. You have no idea how much I hate it. Anything. And like, that's for me the hardest part of coaching sports. But dude, I call it high value parenting.
I love it. No, I want to do it, but I haven't yet. Maybe I should.
And I'm telling you, I actually like coaching sports I don't know anything about, like soccer. I don't know anything about soccer. So like, I could just show up and like, but when I coach football and someone like calls a play that beats my defense, like I'm like,
You still.
dude, I take it personally.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that, I'll tell you, I think you're about to get into that phase of your life, because my oldest is 13, so I'm probably 6-7 years in, where like they start playing soccer and baseball and basketball, and that is so much fun. That'll take up your time.
For sure. My oldest has played soccer. My middle is just getting started. My 1-year-old comes with me I'm about to get into that phase.
Yeah.
So
Coach them up. All right, my man. Well, I know you're going to keep coaching. You can keep pushing. I can't thank you enough for coming out to Nashville.
This is awesome.
It's a beautiful place. You know, I say Nashville has everything you love about Texas and some of the things you don't.
I know.
Like that.
You've been
that
coaching.
90. What was it? 90 days over 100 degrees. Is that like the summer in Texas?
Dude, it was brutal. The last 2 summers have been
we're
brutal.
we're always about 10 degrees cooler. So it'll be hot. It's humid in the summer, but it's bearable. Get yourself a pool. Go swimming in the river down the street from me. Go over to the lake. It's a good spot, my man.
But everything's bigger in Texas. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, so are the property taxes.
That is true.
All right, my man. It's good to see you.
My man. Thank you.